The rain came down hard on Arinder that night. Not the soft kind. Not the kind you ignore. This was the kind that hit the ground like it meant something. Cars moved slower. People stayed inside. The streets looked almost empty. Inside a small roadside diner, warm light pushed back against the storm. The windows were fogged, the air smelled like fried food and coffee, and a quiet hum filled the room. In the far corner, a man sat with a child. Cairo Shin. He didn't look like someone who belonged in a place like this. His presence filled the space without effort. His black suit was sharp, untouched by the chaos outside. His expression was calm but not relaxed. So, controlled. The kind of stillness that made people look away without knowing why. Across from him sat a boy. Kale Shin. 7 years old. Quiet. Careful. He had a small plate of fries in front of him. He picked them one at a time, slow, like he was thinking about something with each bite. He didn't speak. He didn't complain. He never did. Cairo watched him. Not openly. Not in a way others would notice. But he watched. There was something about Kale that stayed on his mind more than anything else. The boy was too quiet. Too observant. Too used to silence. Cairo didn't know how to fix that. He wasn't good with things like that. He understood control. He understood power. He understood how to make people listen. But this was different. His phone sat on the table beside him. The screen had gone dark, but the message was still in his mind. Are you coming home tonight? 7 simple words. He had read them more than once. And for once, he had changed his plans. That's how they ended up here. Just dinner. Nothing more. Cairo leaned back slightly, his eyes moving once across the room. A habit. Always aware. Always watching. Then, the door opened. The wind came in first. Cold. Sure. Then the rain followed, blowing in through the doorway. And then, she didn't rush. Most people did. They ran inside, shaking off water, trying to escape the cold. But not her. Valira Thorne walked in like she had already decided she would not be affected by the storm. Her shoulders were straight. Her chin level. Her boots were worn at the heel, her jacket soaked through, strands of dark hair clinging to her face. She looked tired but not weak. There was a difference. Beside her, holding her hand with both of hers, was a little girl. Naira Thorne. 6 years old. Her eyes were wide, taking everything in. Curious. Alert. Not afraid, just aware. Valira didn't look around the room for approval. She didn't search for comfort. She simply stepped inside like she had every right to be there. Cairo looked up. And didn't look away. It didn't take him long to read people. It never had. 3 seconds was enough. That's all he needed. He saw the soaked clothes. The worn boots. The quiet tension in her shoulders. The way she held the girl's hand, not loosely but firmly. Protective. And then he saw something else. Something he didn't expect. She wasn't carrying weakness. She was carrying weight. And she wasn't letting it bend her. One thought formed in his mind, clear and certain. Unbreakable. At the counter, Valira spoke quietly to the server. Her voice was calm, direct. No extra words. No hesitation. Naira stayed close to her side at first. Then her eyes began to move. Around the room. Across the tables. Until they stopped. On Kale. The 2 children looked at each other. No smiles. No waving. Just a simple, quiet look. The kind children gave when they were trying to understand someone without words. Naira leaned slightly toward her mother. Mom? Her voice was soft. That boy has a lot of fries. Valira didn't turn right away. She didn't respond immediately either. She followed her daughter's gaze after a moment. She saw the boy. Then, she noticed the man sitting across from him. Cairo. Her body stilled just slightly. Not fear. Recognition. Not of who he was. But of what he felt like. There was something about him that didn't belong in ordinary spaces. She didn't stare. She didn't react. She simply looked once. Then looked away. Filed him under something simple. Not my concern. Back at the table, Kale had already made a decision. He looked at Naira. Then at his plate. Then back at her. Slowly, without saying anything, he pushed the plate of fries toward the edge of the table closest to her. An offer. Simple. Clear. No words needed. Naira looked at the fries. Then at him. Then back at her mother. Valira saw it. And this time, she turned fully. Her eyes met Cairo's. He was already watching. There was no surprise in his expression. No question. Just quiet awareness. He stood. Not quickly. Not slowly. Just with purpose. He crossed the diner in a few steps, stopping at a respectful distance. Not too close. Not distant either. Balanced. He looked at her directly. And spoke. Sit with us. 4 words. No pressure in his tone. No force. But something in it made the air feel different. Valira held his gaze. She didn't answer immediately. She looked at him. Then at Cale. Then at Naira, whose eyes said everything she wasn't saying out loud. This mattered to her. That was clear. Valira looked back at Cairo. Her voice when she spoke was steady. We don't need anything. I know, he said. And then. He said nothing else. No explanation. No persuasion. No added words. He just stood there. Waiting. Not impatient. Not demanding. Just waiting. Like her answer belonged to her. And he was not going to take that from her. Valira noticed that. And it caught her off guard more than anything else. Most people didn't wait. They pushed. They insisted. They made it about themselves. He didn't. He stood still in the middle of the diner, the storm still hitting the windows behind him, and let the silence stretch. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was intentional. Valira glanced down at Naira again. Then back at him. A quiet breath left her. 10 minutes, she said. It wasn't agreement. Not fully. But it was enough. Cairo gave a small nod. He stepped aside. Not leading. Not guiding. Just making space. Valira walked past him. Naira close at her side. And for a moment, the storm outside didn't matter. Because something had already begun. Something quiet. Something small. Something that, right now, looked like nothing at all. But nights like this were never just nights. Morning in Arinder came in gray. Not dark. Not bright. Just quiet. The kind of morning that didn't rush you but didn't wait either. Valira Thorne had been awake for a while. She stood by the small window of her apartment, watching the street below. People moved with purpose, cars passed, life continued like it always did. Nothing had changed. And yet, something felt different. Behind her, Naira sat on the floor with a small object in her hands. A simple thing. Small. Red. Plastic. Given without explanation. Naira rolled it slowly across the floor, then picked it up again, careful with it in a way that made it seem more valuable than it was. Are we going to see him again? She asked. Valira didn't turn. Her eyes stayed on the street. I don't know, she said. It wasn't a lie. But it wasn't the full truth either. Because she had thought about it. More than once. More than she wanted to admit. That night at the diner had been simple on the surface. Just a meal. Just a conversation. But there was something underneath it. Something she couldn't name. And that made it dangerous. Valira had built her life carefully. Step by step. Decision by decision. There was no space in it for things she couldn't control. And yet, her mind kept returning to one thing. Not his words. Not what he said. But what he didn't do. He didn't push. He didn't impress. He didn't try to prove anything. He just existed. And somehow that stayed with her. Naira stood up and walked closer, holding the small object up. He said I can keep it, she said. Valira looked down at it. Then at her daughter. Then keep it, she replied. Naira smiled slightly, satisfied, and went back to the floor. Valira turned away from the window. Get ready, she said. We're going out. The park in Arinder was wide and open. Even on a gray day, it felt alive. Children ran across the grass. Voices carried through the air. The sound of movement, laughter, and life filled the space. Naira walked beside Valira, her steps quicker than usual. She didn't say why. She didn't have to. Valira noticed. But she didn't comment. They moved along the path, past benches and trees until Naira slowed. Then stopped. Valira followed her gaze. And saw them. Cairo Shin stood near the edge of the open space, his posture straight, his presence as still as it had been in the diner. Beside him, Cale moved quickly toward the climbing structure, already focused, already engaged. Cairo didn't move right away. He simply stood. Watching. Not the park. Not the people. But them. Valira felt it before she fully looked at him. That same quiet awareness. She didn't hesitate. She walked forward. Naira didn't wait. The moment she recognized Cale, she ran. No fear. No doubt. Just movement. Cale saw her coming. He didn't smile. But he didn't stop her either. They met in the middle, both talking at once, their words overlapping, fast, excited, full of things they had held onto since the last time. Valira slowed as she approached. Cairo stepped forward slightly. They stopped a short distance apart. Neither of them spoke immediately. There was no need. The children filled the space with sound. And for a moment that was enough. Veilira crossed her arms lightly. You came, she said. Cairo gave a small nod. So did you. Her eyes shifted toward Cale and Naira. They remembered, she said. They do, he replied. A brief silence followed. Not uncomfortable. Just present. Veilira looked back at him. You don't talk much, she said. No, Cairo answered. You listen more than you speak. Yes. She studied him for a moment. Most people do the opposite. I'm not most people. There was no pride in his tone. No challenge. Just a statement. Veilira let out a quiet breath. That's clear. They stood side by side now, both watching the children. Cale showed Naira how to climb faster, where to place her feet, how to balance without falling. Naira followed closely, determined, focused. Neither of them held back. They didn't act like strangers. They didn't act like they had just met days ago. They acted like they had decided something already, and didn't feel the need to explain it. Veilira noticed. That's not normal, she said. What isn't? That, she nodded toward them. Kids don't usually connect like that. Cairo watched them for a moment before answering. He doesn't usually talk that much. Veilira raised an eyebrow slightly. Then she's the reason. Seems that way. A faint shift passed through Cairo's expression. Small. Almost unnoticeable. But it was there. Veilira saw it. And something in her settled. Just slightly. She didn't question it. Didn't analyze it. She just let it exist. Time moved quietly. The gray sky didn't change much, but the park felt warmer. The distance between them didn't feel as sharp. Cairo spoke again after a while. What do you do? He asked. Veilira glanced at him. Work, she said simply. What kind? She hesitated for a moment. Not because she didn't want to answer, but because she was deciding how much to say. Construction, she said finally. Different sites. Wherever there's work. Cairo nodded once. You learned that somewhere? I learned it because I had to. Her tone didn't change. It didn't need to. Cairo didn't respond immediately. He understood what that meant. More than most people would. They fell into silence again. But this time it felt different. Less guarded. Less distant. Just two people watching something simple. Something good. After a while the wind picked up. Not strong. But enough to carry a chill. Veilira adjusted slightly, pulling her jacket closer. Cairo noticed. He didn't say anything at first. Then, he removed his coat. Veilira saw the movement immediately. Don't, she said. He paused. You're cold, he replied. I'm fine. You've been cold since you got here. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You don't know that. I do. There was no argument in his voice. Just quiet certainty. He held the coat out. I run warm, he added. It doesn't cost me anything. Veilira looked at the coat. Then at him. Then back at the coat. This wasn't about warmth. Not really. It was about something else. Something harder to define. She didn't take it right away. She stood there for a moment thinking. Measuring. Then, she reached out. And took it. She didn't say thank you. He didn't expect her to. She put it on. It was heavier than she expected. Warmer too. Cairo turned his attention back to the children. Like the moment didn't need to be acknowledged. And that mattered. Veilira looked at him again. Longer this time. Then she looked away. The children returned after a while, breathless, talking over each other, carrying pieces of the park with them. Sticks, leaves, small things that somehow held meaning. Naira held the small red object tightly. Cale walked beside her, quieter again but not distant. Just settled. Veilira stepped forward. It's time, she said. Naira looked up, ready to argue. Then stopped. She nodded. Cairo spoke quietly to Cale. They moved toward each other again. Not rushed. Not delayed. Just steady. Veilira stopped in front of him. She adjusted the coat slightly. I'll return this, she said. Cairo looked at her. You can keep it, he replied. She frowned slightly. That assumes there's a reason to. There is. Her eyes met his. Pause. Then. What reason? She asked. Cairo held her gaze. There will be a next time. Not a question. Not a demand. Just a statement. Veilira didn't respond immediately. She looked at him. Then at the children. Then back at him again. Something in her shifted. Small. But real. She didn't agree. She didn't refuse. She simply turned. Come on, she said to Naira. They began to walk away. After a few steps, Naira looked back and waved. Cale lifted his hand slightly in return. Veilira didn't turn around. but she felt it. The weight of the coat around her shoulders. The quiet certainty in his voice. And the feeling she had been trying not to name. The one that made things complicated. The one that made things uncertain. The one that made her think. Maybe this wasn't over. Maybe it had just begun. The day started like any other. Cold air. Gray sky. The quiet rhythm of a city that never really stopped moving. Valira Thorne sat alone at a small table, her phone in her hand, her attention split between the screen and the time. She wasn't looking for anything. Just passing minutes. Waiting. The noise around her blurred into the background, voices, movement, the steady hum of machines working somewhere nearby. Then, a name caught her eye. She almost scrolled past it. Almost. But something made her stop. Just for a second. She looked again. Read it slower this time. And then again. The words didn't change. They didn't need to. They landed exactly the same each time. Cairo Shin. The name sat there, clear and sharp, surrounded by words that carried weight. Not rumors. Not guesses. Facts. Connections. A network. A name tied to something called Silent Scorpion. Not a company. Not a business. Something else. Something deeper. Something dangerous. Valira's hand went still. The noise around her came back all at once, louder now, sharper, harder to ignore. She didn't react right away. Didn't stand. Didn't speak. She just sat there. Reading. Taking it in piece by piece. And slowly, things began to make sense. The way people moved around him. The way he spoke. The way he didn't explain things. The stillness. The control. It had all been there. She just hadn't named it. Until now. Valira locked her phone and placed it face down on the table. Her eyes stayed on it for a moment. Then she leaned back slightly. A quiet breath left her. No panic. No shock. Just clarity. And clarity came with one simple truth. She had been wrong to let him get close. The building was quiet. Clean lines. Sharp edges. Glass and steel. The kind of place that didn't invite questions. Valira stepped inside without hesitation. She didn't belong there. That was clear. But she didn't move like someone who cared. Her steps were steady. Direct. The front desk slowed her for a moment. A few words. A brief exchange. But she didn't argue. She didn't explain. She simply waited. And eventually, she was let through. Cairo Shin stood near the far end of the room when she entered. He saw her immediately. Of course he did. He always noticed. There was a brief shift in his expression. Not surprise. Not confusion. Recognition. Like he had expected this. Just not exactly when. Valira didn't waste time. She walked toward him, her posture straight, her eyes steady. We need to talk. Cairo held her gaze for a moment. Then nodded once. He turned and led the way to a quieter space. A closed room. So, controlled. He stepped inside first, then turned to face her. The door shut behind them. The air felt different immediately. Contained. Focused. Valira didn't sit. She didn't wait. She spoke. Cairo Shin, she said. Her voice was calm. Even. But there was something under it now. Something sharper. Silent Scorpion. The word stayed in the space between them. No emotion added. No accusation. Just truth. Cairo didn't interrupt. Didn't react quickly. He let the silence settle. Then, where did you hear it? He asked. That doesn't matter. It does. It doesn't, she repeated. Pause. Short. Clear. Valira stepped closer. Is it true? Cairo looked at her. Not avoiding. Not deflecting. Just deciding. Which part? He asked. Her jaw tightened slightly. Any of it. He didn't answer immediately. Not because he didn't have an answer, but because he understood the weight of what came next. He could lie. It would be easy. Simple. Clean. But he didn't. The name exists, he said. The connections are real. Her eyes didn't leave his. And you? She asked. Another pause. Then, I'm part of it. The room went still. Not louder. Not heavier. Just still. Valira nodded once. Like something had been confirmed. Not discovered. Confirmed. I thought so, she said quietly. She turned slightly, taking a step away, then stopped. Her hand tightened briefly at her side. Then she faced him again. This time, there was no space left for anything else. Are we safe? 4 words. Simple. Direct. Everything inside them. Cairo didn't answer. Not right away. His expression didn't change. But something in his eyes did. Something small. Something honest. And that told her more than words ever could. You can't answer that, she said. It wasn't a question. Cairo held her gaze. I can protect you, he said. That's not what I asked. I know. Then answer me. Another silence. Longer this time. More complete. Cairo didn't look away. Didn't try to soften it. Didn't try to reshape the truth into something easier to hear. Because he couldn't. And he wasn't going to pretend he could. I can't promise that nothing will ever reach you, he said. There it was. Clear. Unfiltered. The truth. Veolaira closed her eyes for a brief second. Then opened them again. Nothing in her expression broke. Nothing in her posture shifted. But something inside her. Moved. A line drawn. A decision made. That's all I needed to know, she said. Cairo stepped forward slightly. Veolaira. She stopped him with a look. Not sharp. Not angry. Just final. You should have told me, she said. I would have, he replied. When? He didn't answer. She nodded once. That's what I thought. She picked up her bag. Her movements were calm. Measured. Controlled. Just like his. But different. Because hers came from necessity. His came from habit. She moved toward the door. Stopped for a moment. Without turning. My daughter doesn't get close to things that put her at risk, she said. Cairo stood still. I understand. Do you? Pause. Then. Yes. Veolaira opened the door. The noise of the outside space came back in. Distant. Unimportant. She stepped through. But before she left completely, she spoke again. Quietly. Not for the room. Not for anyone else. Just for him. This ends here. Then she walked away. No hesitation. No looking back. Just forward. Steady. Certain. Cairo didn't follow. Didn't call her name. Didn't try to stop her. He stood in the center of the room, the silence returning around him. His hands stayed at his sides. Still. Controlled. The same as always. But something had changed. Not outside. Not in the room. Inside. He had built his world carefully. Every decision precise. Every move calculated. Nothing left to chance. And yet, this was something he couldn't control. Couldn't fix. Couldn't stop. For the first time in a long time, he had reached for something. And watched it walk away. And there was nothing he could do about it. The first time Veolaira noticed it, she almost ignored it. A man standing across the street. Nothing unusual. People stood around all the time, waiting, watching, passing time. But something about him stayed in her mind longer than it should have. The way he stood. Too still. Too aware. She kept walking. Didn't slow down. Didn't turn her head. Just moved forward like she hadn't seen anything at all. Because that's how you handled things like this. You didn't react. You didn't show fear. You didn't give anyone a reason to look twice. By the time she reached her building, she had already decided it was nothing. Just a man. Just a moment. The second time. It wasn't the same man. That's what made it different. This one stood near the corner, half-turned, pretending to check his phone. But his eyes lifted too quickly. Tracked her for just a second too long. Veolaira felt it immediately. That quiet shift in the air. The kind you only notice when you've learned to survive without help. She kept walking. Steady. Unchanged. But her awareness sharpened. Every step measured. Every movement controlled. She didn't look back. Not once. By the third time. There was no doubt. Different face. Different place. Same feeling. Watching. Waiting. Tracking. Veolaira stood at the edge of the street, the noise of Irinder moving around her, and understood something clearly. This wasn't random. It wasn't coincidence. And it wasn't over. She turned down another street instead of heading home directly. Changed direction. Adjusted her pace. Watched reflections in windows instead of turning her head. And there it was again. A figure behind her. Not close. Not obvious. But there. Following. Her chest tightened slightly. Not panic. Not fear. Something colder. Understanding. She had seen this before. Not exactly like this. But close enough. This was pressure. Not direct. Not loud. Subtle. Intentional. She reached her building eventually. Unlocked the door. Stepped inside. And only then did she let the breath leave her lungs. Inside the apartment, everything looked the same. Small space. Clean. Ordered. Naira sat at the table, drawing, her focus deep, her world simple. Veolaira stood near the door for a moment longer than usual. Listening. Nothing. No footsteps. No voices. Just silence. She locked the door. Checked it once. Then again. Naira looked up. You're late, she said. Work ran long. That was all. Naira accepted it easily and went back to her drawing. Veolaira moved through the apartment, checking windows, small things, quiet things. Nothing out of place. Everything normal. But the feeling didn't leave. It stayed. Full. Constant. Like something waiting just out of sight. The days that followed didn't make it better. If anything, they made it clearer. The faces changed. But the pattern didn't. Always there. Always watching. Never approaching. Never speaking. Just enough to be seen. Not enough to be confronted. And that was the worst part. Because it meant one thing. They wanted her to notice. Veolaira stood in the middle of her apartment one evening, the light fading outside, and let the truth settle in. This wasn't about her. Not really. She was being used. A message. A point of pressure. And she knew exactly where it was coming from. She reached for her phone. Stopped. Her hand hovered for a moment. Then lowered. No. She wasn't going to do that. She wasn't going to call him. She wasn't going to step into that world. She had made her choice. She was going to handle this herself. Like she always had. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Every small sound felt louder. Every shift in the building made her eyes open. She lay still, listening. Waiting. Nothing happened. And somehow, that made it worse. The message came the next evening. Her phone buzzed once. Unknown number. She looked at it for a moment before opening it. 4 words. Don't go outside tonight. No name. No explanation. Just that. Veolaira stared at the screen. Her jaw tightened slightly. She didn't respond. Didn't move. Just stood there. Then, a sound. From the hallway. Not loud. Not clear. But wrong. She turned toward the door slowly. Every movement controlled. Measured. Naira was asleep in the next room. That mattered. That was all that mattered. Veolaira stepped closer to the door. Quiet. Careful. She stopped just before it. Listened. Voices. Full. Hard to make out. Then, silence. Not the normal kind. Not the empty kind. This was different. Complete. Like something had just ended. Veolaira reached for the door. Paused. Then moved to the side instead. She leaned slightly and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. At first. Then, at the far end, a figure. Standing still. Back turned. Hands in his pockets. Not moving. Not leaving. Cairo Shin. Veolaira stayed where she was. Watching. Her heartbeat didn't race. It slowed. Focused. Everything narrowed down to that one point. That one moment. He was there. Not as a memory. Not as a question. But real. Present. Waiting. She opened the door. The sound was soft. Controlled. Cairo turned immediately. His eyes met hers. His jacket was wet. Rain still clung to his hair, his shoulders. He had been outside. For a while. There were 2 of them, he said. His voice was calm. Steady. They're gone. Veolaira held the doorframe. Who sent them? She asked. Cairo didn't hesitate. Someone who wants leverage. Her expression didn't change. And I'm that leverage. Pause. Yes. The word didn't come with apology. It came with truth. Veolaira absorbed it. Didn't react. Didn't step back. Just stood there. You've been watching my building, she said. Yes. Since when? Since you walked away. Another silence. Short. Heavy. You didn't tell me. You told me to stay away. That's not the same thing. No, he agreed. It's not. The rain outside continued, softer now, steady against the windows. Veolaira looked at him. Really looked this time. At the wet jacket. The still posture. The eyes that didn't look away. He hadn't come to explain. He hadn't come to convince. He had come to stand there. To make sure nothing reached her door. And he had done it. Without asking. Without permission. Without making it known. Until now. Veolaira stepped back. Just slightly. Enough. Come in, she said. Her voice was quiet. Controlled. Not soft. Not warm. But open. Just enough. Cairo didn't move immediately. He waited. Just for a second. Making sure. Then he stepped inside. The door closed behind him. And something shifted. Not outside. Not in the hallway. Inside that small apartment. A line had been crossed. Not by force. Not by pressure. But by choice. And this time. Changed everything. The apartment was quiet. Not empty. Not tense. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that came after something important had already begun. Veolaira stood near the counter, her hands resting lightly on the surface, her eyes on Cairo. He hadn't taken off his jacket yet. Rain still clung to the fabric, small drops falling slowly to the floor. He didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he did and it just didn't matter. There was something different about him now. Not in the way he stood. Not in the way he looked. But in what he allowed to be seen. Veolyra didn't speak immediately. She gave him the space. Not out of comfort. Out of intention. "Tell me everything," she said finally. Her voice was steady. No hesitation. No room for half answers. Cairo met her gaze. And for the first time, he didn't measure his response. He didn't filter it. He didn't choose what to reveal and what to keep. He just told the truth. Not quickly. Not in pieces. But clearly. He spoke about where he came from. Not the version people saw now. The version from before. The one built in places where rules didn't exist. Where power wasn't given. It was taken. He didn't dress it up. Didn't soften it. Didn't pretend it was something it wasn't. He spoke about decisions. About consequences. About things that couldn't be undone. Veolyra listened. She didn't interrupt. Didn't react to every word. But she heard all of it. Every part. Every piece. Because she needed to. Because this was the moment that decided everything. Cairo continued. He spoke about the life he had built after. The structure. The control. The shift from chaos into something stable. But he didn't call it clean. Because it wasn't. He didn't pretend the past had disappeared. Because it hadn't. "It doesn't go away," he said. "Nothing like that ever does." Veolyra's eyes stayed on him. "I know," she replied quietly. There was no judgment in her voice. Just understanding. Cairo paused. Just for a second. Then he continued. "I keep it contained," he said. "I make sure it doesn't spread. That's not the same as ending it." "No," he agreed. "It's not." Silence filled the space between them. Not empty. Full. Heavy with everything that had been said. And everything that hadn't. Veolyra turned slightly, her eyes moving toward the hallway. Naira was asleep. Safe. For now. That mattered. She turned back. "I don't need you to be something you're not," she said. Cairo didn't respond immediately. "I need you to be honest," she continued. Every time. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. The weight of her words was clear. Cairo held her gaze. "No lies," she added. "No half-truths." Pause. "Then, can you do that?" Cairo didn't look away. Didn't hesitate. "Yes." The answer came without effort. Without doubt. Because it wasn't a promise made to convince her. It was a decision. Veolyra studied him for a moment longer. Then she nodded once. Small. But real. That was enough. For now. The night passed slowly. Neither of them rushed it. Neither of them tried to fill the silence with unnecessary words. They existed in the same space. Aware. Present. Careful. But no longer distant. At some point the rain stopped. The city outside softened. And eventually, morning came. Light slipped through the window, pale and quiet. Cairo woke first. Not suddenly. Not sharply. Just aware. He stayed still for a moment, listening. The apartment had its own rhythm. Soft sounds. Small movements. Life waking up. He sat up slowly. The room felt different in daylight. Less guarded. Less closed. More real. A small figure appeared at the edge of the doorway. Naira. She stood there watching him. Not surprised. Not confused. Just curious. "You stayed," she said. Cairo nodded once. "I did." She walked in slowly, holding something in her hands. A small cup. Careful. Balanced. She stopped a few steps away and looked at him. "Are you going to leave?" she asked. Cairo considered the question. Then answered simply. "No." Naira nodded like that was the answer she expected. She stepped closer and held out the cup. "Here." Cairo took it carefully. "Thank you," he said. She watched him for a moment, studying his face with quiet focus. Then she sat down nearby, close but not too close. Comfortable. Like she had already decided something about him. And that decision didn't need to be explained. Cairo looked at her. At the calm in her expression. At the ease. Children saw things differently. They didn't measure the same way. They didn't carry the same weight. They chose based on what they felt. And Naira had chosen. The sound of movement came from the kitchen. Veolyra. She appeared a moment later, her steps steady, her eyes moving first to Naira, then to Cairo. She took in the scene. Didn't interrupt it. Didn't change it. Just observed. Then she spoke. "There's food," she said. Simple. direct. Cairo stood, followed her into the kitchen. They stood side by side for a moment. Not speaking, not rushing. The quiet between them felt different now. Less uncertain. More settled. Cairo spoke first. I don't know how to do this, he said. Veolaira looked at him. Do what? This, he replied. This part. Her expression didn't change, but her attention sharpened. I know how to control situations, he continued. I know how to handle problems. Pause. But this isn't something I can control. Veolaira waited. I don't know how to be someone who is safe, he said. The words were simple, but they carried weight, because they were true. And he wasn't hiding that anymore. Veolaira held his gaze. You don't need to be perfect, she said. I don't expect that. Cairo didn't look away. But you need to be real, she added. I am. I know, she said quietly. That's why this is difficult. A small silence passed. Then Cairo spoke again. I want to change, he said. Not for power. Not for control. Not for anything else. Just that. Veolaira studied him. Long enough to understand that he meant it. Not as a promise. As a direction. She nodded once. Then we start there, she said. Time moved. Not quickly. Not slowly. Just forward. Months passed. The city changed with the seasons. Cold faded into warmth. Gray skies into clearer ones. And somewhere within that time, something steady took shape. The apartment was different now. Still simple. Still grounded. But fuller. Lived in. Warm in a way that couldn't be forced. Naira's voice filled the space. Light. Bright. Alive. Kale's voice joined hers. Quieter. But present. They moved through the room together, their steps easy, their world shared. No hesitation. No distance. Like they had always been part of the same space. Veolaira stood near the window. Watching. Not guarding. Just watching. Cairo stood beside her. Close. Not distant. Not separate. Present. The city of Arinder stretched out beyond them. Busy. Unpredictable. Unforgiving. The same as always. But inside that apartment, things were different. Not perfect. Not untouched by the past. Not free from what existed outside those walls. But real. Built carefully. Chosen daily. Veolaira glanced at him. You stayed, she said. Cairo looked at her. Yes. No explanation. No added words. Just truth. She nodded slightly. Then turned her attention back to the room. To the children. To the life that had formed piece by piece. And for the first time, it didn't feel uncertain. It didn't feel temporary. It felt like something that could hold. Not because it was easy, but because they chose it. Every day. Together. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories.